Greetings all, in this video I'll be doing an inbox review of the Hawk Testors 1970 AU-1 Corsair. So the tooling for this kit was originally designed in 1953, which means this 72-year-old kit was brand new when the Corsairs were still rolling off the production line. So with that in mind, let's have a look at this vintage kit. So on the front here we have some very fantastic artwork of a AU-1 Corsair flying through some flames, and it looks like along a coastline there, and you can see it's firing off all its guns and rockets, so there's a lot of action going on, and there's another Corsair just below it. And it's painted in the sort of post-World War II, I think even post-Korean grey scheme from the US Marines into the Navy. And I believe this particular unit was based, as it says on the tail, at Quantico, which I believe were doing mainly training at this stage. And in the corner we have a copyright from 1959, which I believe is when this particular tooling of the AU-1 was released by Hawk. Although, interestingly, the original tooling that this is based on was released in 1953. And that means, technically, this tooling was around at the same time as Corsairs were being produced, which I think is pretty cool and says something a bit about the age of this kit. As well as that, we also have our titles of the US Marines bought AU-1, a little thing here that says we have instructions in English and in French, plus we've got a little thing that says we have 37 parts, which is not an awful lot for a small kit, complete with tailhook, landing gear, and a canopy, so this kit has it all, as you can see. And we've got the Testors and the Hawk logo up the side there. I'm not exactly sure when this particular one was released. I have seen various parts of these boxes according to Scalemates released from both 59 and I think in the 70s. Although they were producing the variants of this tooling up until I believe 2011. On the sides here we've just got some other promotional material or advertisements for other products, a repeat of the box art on the top here, and a little thing that says it was made and printed in Canada. Then we've got some more advertising on the top, and again another repeat of the box art on the side. On the back here we have a little picture of some of Testors' old products, and it says to use Testors paints and adhesives to build and finish your kit, although obviously anyone would be suitable as long as it's for plastic models. So this box is sort of a top opener, but it's still formed to the side there, so it's a bit like a sort of lid box. And as you can see, we have our decals on the top, which we might as well have a quick look at because they're here. And as you can see, they have suffered a bit of damage, but given that this kit could potentially be almost 60 years old or 70, I would say that's to be expected. These are probably not going to be usable, but for the time, they look like they were reasonably detailed. You can sort of make out some of the finer writing, although there's no common stencils or finer markings, it's just the sort of main markings for the scheme. Next we have the instructions, which we'll have a quick look at. So they're pretty much printed on a single A4 sheet, and as you can see we have proper pictures of the assembly stages. So starting off we have a little bit of a guide to some of the various products that can be used from Testors' range, and then assembly starts with the wing, which has a upper and a lower section. Next we have the fuselage halves with nothing for the inside of the cockpit, basically just adding those two halves together. Then we have the propeller, which gets added to the cowling, and there appears to be a little retainer, not that it's super clear in the instructions, but it does says there's one here. Then we're adding the cowling to the front and attaching the fuselage to the wings, and adding the two horizontal stabilizers at the rear. The landing gear then consists of a strut, and the tail wheel and hook come as separate pieces. Then we add the tail wheel doors, followed by the main wheel doors and the strut door at the front there. Next we have the tanks along with the tyres. This also appears to be a marking guide at this stage. It does say in English a sort of guide to what exactly each step entails. It says here to glue tank halves together and cement completed tank to the model. If you like, you can paint the upper surface of your model light grey. You can now begin applying decals. We have a pilot figure, which appears to be just the head getting added to the cockpit, adding the decals to the upper surface of the model, and then we've got options for bombs and rockets, which the AU-1 Corsair was mainly designed to carry. And finally you have a canopy, which comes as a single piece, and a small antenna. On the other side of the instructions, we appear to have a sort of marking guide or a decal positioning key, although it doesn't really show anything about what colours you should paint things. It just sort of has labels for the various parts of the aircraft. It's also got a little bit of history about the development of the Corsair, which is always nice to have with the kit. And yeah, I'd say in general this is probably quite useful if you're new to model making and learning a bit more about aircraft and what the various parts on them are. However, if you're more experienced, this isn't really super helpful. But hey, interesting little inclusion, and the instructions are definitely very different to what we get in more modern kits. And now we'll move on to have a look at the plastic bits. And as you can see, they're sort of just loose in the box here. I don't know if they would have come in a plastic bag originally. However, since I got this one secondhand, obviously they could have, and you might not know. So we might as well start off with the fuselage halves, which we have two of here. And I'll bring them nice and close to try and show the details. In general, they appear to look quite like a Corsair. They've got the same sort of shape for the tail, and the body looks alright, so dimension-wise it looks pretty decent. And they seem to have done a nice job of adding that sort of lip. Not too sure if they were on the AU-1, as you can sort of see in this picture there doesn't appear to be as much of a lip there. But interestingly, it seems to be a mix of both recessed and raised details. We've actually got recessed panel lines here for the surface of the rudder, plus we've got one for where the rudder joins to the tail. And we appear to have a couple of these panels as recesses along here, with a few raised rivets and recessed access hatches on the top there, but raised panel lines on the rear. So a little bit of a curious mix. As you can see, there's nothing for the cockpit. In fact, there's not even an empty hole. It's actually completely solid plastic, so that's not very detailed at all. But given the age of this kit, I would say that is still pretty decent. I'm definitely surprised to actually see any recessed detail whatsoever, but no, there definitely is some with the little handles there and the various access hatches. Next, we appear to have the doors for the tail wheel cover. And there's two of these ones here. Nothing too detailed on them. There are a few ejector pin marks and bits of excess sprue that will need cleaning up, but that's to be expected. Then we have our upper and lower wing halves here. And again, they, in fact, I think this is only recessed detail by the looks of things. I can't see, apart from these raised rocket and bomb racks, everything is recessed. So we've got recessed flap detail, a little bit of texturing for the outer part of the wings there. I believe they were metal on the later Corsairs, but I could be mistaken and they might still have some fabric covered sections. No detail for the interior of the wheel wells, although as you can see, you've got some nice guidance parts there for adding the landing gear on. And for the most part, both the upper and lower surface look pretty good. Interestingly, they've actually done a bit of texturing on the middle of the wing. I'm not too sure how well the camera is picking that up, but that's for the anti-slip area, so it looks like they've done a fair bit of detail given the age of this kit. Moving on, we'll have a look at this sprue here, which appears to contain the rockets. They're nothing too amazing, but I'm sure they are still pretty decent, especially considering the age of this kit. And we also have our pilot figure here, who is a little lopsided with how he's moulded. His right side is slightly higher than his left side, but honestly, for the most part, he doesn't look too bad at all. He's pretty decently proportioned by the looks of things, has some nice details on his face. Shame that they didn't do the full body and do something like what Airfix did with their models, but honestly, for the time, still pretty good. Then we have our landing gear here, which is all pretty basic, relatively cleanly moulded, although there are a few ejector pin marks on the inside of parts here, and there's a fair bit of flashing on the wheels there, but for the whole, not too bad. And it appears we also have our retaining pin here for the propeller, and the propeller itself is just here. Now, I believe the AU-1 would have had a 4-blade rather than a 3-blade, so that might be a mistake, but I'll correct that if it's not. But it appears to sort of just slot into that, and you can glue that, and that will retain it into the engine cowling and make sure that it can spin. And speaking of the engine cowling, that is honestly probably the most disappointing part of this kit. Not only is it rather basic in detail, which is forgivable given the age of this kit, but unfortunately it looks like they've sort of recycled another version of the Corsair, because the AU-1 has a pretty distinct and kind of flat top to it, and a bit of an oval kind of fat shape to it, whereas this has the earlier Corsair sort of perfect circle. So not super accurate and not very detailed, but for the most part, still, given the age, pretty impressive. They've done all the cow flaps there with recessed details, and they've had a nice go at doing the first row of cylinders there. Even though they're a little bit too far out, I think they should be a little bit deeper. It's still not a bad attempt at detail, and I'm sure for the time that was probably borderline groundbreaking, really. We appear to have a bit of sprue here with no parts attached, and the last sprue we've got here with any parts on it are the bombs and the fuel tanks, which, yeah, not too bad. They seem okay shape-wise. And finally, we've got our elevators, or horizontal stabilizers, once again with some very decent recessed details on them. And you've got the guide pins there to help line them up, and for the most part, they look pretty good. We've also got the tail wheel combined with the hook there. So again, reasonably basic and rudimentary, but still not too bad given the age of the kit. And finally, we have our clear canopy here, which as you can see comes as a single piece. Honestly, it doesn't look too bad at all. Given how curved the Corsair windows are, it's not really too badly distorted at all. And I'm willing to forgive all of those scratch marks on it as a possibility that it was rolling around for quite a few years and getting scratched by those other plastic parts. You can see some rather nasty scratches and like almost rivet looking details scratched along the side there. Not present on the other side though, but there are a few other little scratch marks here and there. So honestly, not too bad given the age of the kit, but a little bit below what would be standard for nowadays. So that pretty much wraps up our look at the Testors / Hawk US Marines Vought AU-1 Corsair. So definitely not a prize-winning, absolutely groundbreaking kit by today's standards, but quite a fascinating look into the past, and given the fact that they've done a rather unique variant of the Corsair, or at least attempted to, and that it came out roughly when the Corsair was still in production and still in service, I think it's a pretty fascinating kit. Obviously, I got this one second-hand, and I paid around about 5 AUD for it, which I thought for a 1/72nd scale kit of this age is a pretty good deal. I'm thinking what I'll do is I'll actually spend some time and try and 3D print some replacement parts, and see if I can actually use this as a base and get a more detailed and accurate kit out of it. Although, maybe I will just do a simple out-of-the-box build just for the fun of it and just treat it as a bit of a retro one. Otherwise though, I hope you enjoyed having a look at this rather interesting vintage kit, and I'm looking forward to having a build of it, whether it be a resin upgrade video, or maybe just an out-of-the-box vintage throwback. Thank you very much for watching this inbox review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to leave a like. And if you want to see the next Corsair inbox review and my other build videos and stop motions, please subscribe to the channel. And if you want to help fund me making them, then please consider joining my Patreon. A massive thank you to all my wonderful patrons for helping me to fund not only buying the kits, but the products I use to make them. Up next, I'll be having a look at the Hasegawa Corsair in this series, and I'll be releasing the third part of the Tamiya FW190A3 build very soon. Thanks again for watching, and until the next video, as always, take care and model on.